What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Guys, this video was recommended to me. America is not Europe. Definitely going to be interested to see what this video is going to be discussed or really talking about in reference to why America is not Europe. Of course we know that, right? But I know it's going to probably just show the difference, kind of like how in the other videos we've been seeing about the healthcare, about the taxes. So definitely ready to see this about. Y'all hit that subscribe button, send down those recommendations, and let's jump into it.
I was born and grew up in Denmark, and these are countries where the government spends taxes and spends approximately twice the level of the United States. And while I am very sympathetic to many of your spending proposals, especially on the things you mentioned on early childhood and single payer and the like, I also know that these are countries that heavily tax everybody. Not just the rich people, middle classes, they have consumption taxes on everything of 20%. So while I'm very sympathetic to what you say, my sense is still that you would like to spend as a Scandinavian, but not tax as one. Is that correct?
We have, the answer is, you raised some very good points.
Comparing the US with Europe and countries in Europe would be naive, oversimplistic, and offend a bunch of people. Land masses are complex. But I'm going to go ahead and compare them anyways, because some of the comparisons between Europe and the US remain way too superficial.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
It's not uncommon to obsess over the usual suspects for why the US is less equal than Europe and also has less good quality, affordable social programs. The analysis is simple. The US has more billionaires and taxes them less. Europe has less billionaires but taxes them more. Need a larger tax base to fund popular social programs and also less inequality? Just raise the taxes on the rich, like the Europeans do. Now,
and they do not want to do that, because I can say I don't think the rich get taxed. They definitely don't get taxed that much as they should. Like, I feel like what that guy was saying, everybody is equal. Like, it don't matter how much money you got. Like, you're funding a cause, like for healthcare, for all those different things. Like, it shouldn't matter how much money you make. You should be able to give a certain amount. But even the rich, it's like they should be taxed the most, right? If they're making all that money.
Quality, just raise the taxes on the rich.
They know how to get
like
they know how to get around of it.
Now, although the tax rates for rich people explain some part of the difference, it doesn't explain enough. Europeans can afford good social programs because a lot of Europeans pay a lot for them, mainly through indirect taxes. And Europeans are also more equal before taxes even factored in, because a lot of the social programs they pay more for also reduce pre-tax inequality. Where Americans deal with a sales tax at their final point of sale, Europeans deal with a VAT, which is a consumption tax that taxes at multiple steps across entire supply chains. This means that a lot of things in Europe will be more expensive, but that public money can be redistributed towards social programs that will reduce before tax inequality even more.
And I know U.S. definitely don't do none of that. I already know.
The U.S. has, so far, been unable to adopt the same. Why? Well, in part because taxing the wealthiest of society is easier to advertise and justify than taxing everybody a lot more. In Europe, most people don't really need to be convinced about paying for their welfare states because it works sufficiently for most of them. But in the U.S., there's an intimate struggle with deciding whether pre-distribution will be a state, local, or federal solution. Part of the reason is that in the US, the federal government gets the most media attention, while state and local governments can avoid scrutiny. This means that minimum wage hikes in the US are practically always seen as a responsibility for the federal government, which has to delicately balance different costs of living, like laborers living in New York City and miners living in West Virginia. In Europe, though, a country like France or Denmark can opt for different geographically sensitive policy while also being held more directly into account because the assignment of responsibility is clearer to its citizens.
There's this definition of a wicked problem, which is circulating around in the literature, which suggests that a wicked problem is wicked if it has so many dimensions to it that you can't go at one angle to the problem and try to fix it. And I think school finance is like that. So school districts get money from their local communities in the form of property taxes. They'll also get money from the state, and the state might give them money through multiple formulas. And then a portion, a much smaller portion, about 9 or 10%, comes from the federal government. So even if you tried to solve the problem at, say, the state level, there are these other funding sources that come with their own restrictions, which ultimately affect how the money gets used in schools.
And that's why we actually having something go on right now in my town, because they're trying to get funding, or trying to get a bond approved to where they're able to, remodel schools and build a new school and stuff. Which, and I mean, you would think, okay, yeah, that sounds good, but most people are like, wait a minute, how are we gonna do this? What, because if you're paying taxes, property tax, and all that stuff, you have the right to ask questions. You have the right to voice your opinion. But I feel like we have schools that we have little like babies in, like 1, 2, 3-year-olds in, and these schools have been up probably since like the 50s or 60s. And what the most they've been done to them, probably some paint, like, and you got little kids in here. But this is something major, because I know here in the U.S. and especially Texas, they get a good amount for one child being present at school. They get a good amount. So just imagine if everybody, they push so much. I worked in a school. They push attendance so hard. They offer kids pizza parties, free dress, everything, just to get that 90%, 100% attendance. It's a lot. You wonder where
in
it's
Connecticut,
going.
a U.S. state, a school in Bridgeport will be poorer by virtue of being surrounded by poor properties, while a school in Greenwich will be richer because it is surrounded by richer properties. This is because local taxes are largely funded by property values in the area. However, this concept fails to explain everything. Educational disparities also exist across Europe and within its countries. The U.S. is not unique for having a system that predisposes poor children to poor resources. Education systems are complex. Finland is not the same as Sweden, and resources invested in education and the quality that follows does not seem like a linear relationship. The U.S.'s unique situation is that its quality does not match the amount that the U.S. actually spends on it. One of the problems with answering why resources don't match the quality you would expect in the U.S. is because the decentralized nature of school districts makes it pretty difficult to actually identify what spending works and what doesn't. Overall, there are some indications that, compared with Europe, the amount of staffing, the associated health and retirement benefits, alongside transportation, all add up to more costs for the American education system. But the differences don't end there.
In the 1990s, as the crime rate was plummeting, as American life was getting safer and safer, Americans freaked out and thought that if they take their eyes off their children, the children will be abducted. Now, this goes back, the fear was stoked by cable TV in the 1980s. There were a few high-profile abductions. But it's not until the 1990s that we really start locking kids up and saying, you cannot be outside until you're 14 or 15. We took this essential period of childhood from about 8 to 12, when kids throughout history have practiced independence, have gotten into adventures, have made rafts and floated down the Mississippi River. We took that period and said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over.
Kids in the U.S.
I remember when I was younger, I feel like it was still like just a little early 2000s. I mean, to me, like, we could like walk to the store, at 10 years old, walk to the store and stuff, go up and down the street, go around the corner to a friend, no problem. But I feel like now schools are even having like lockdowns, lockouts and stuff like that, just if they see somebody that looks suspicious. And it's a lot. Like, we didn't never have to do like lockdown drills or none of that until I got to high school. That's when it's like they really start practicing that because of what was going on.
Are raised differently than kids in Europe. Some blame the planning that produced more isolated American families, some the over-paranoia towards kidnapping in the 1980s, and others point to an increasingly competitive environment where parents try to give their children an edge over the others by helicoptering them. It's really not that far a stretch to say that many European children could be considered to have more freedom at an earlier age. American children are less likely to be able to walk to school alone compared with European children, which you can of course connect to overall crime rates, and authoritative school policy is still much more accepted across the US than it is in Europe.
So, the real key to the distinctiveness of America is the structure of our government. One part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful. That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion. Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick them out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And, the Europeans...
The difference is simple. European countries are mainly nations, not federations. A European state, if it existed, could never be the same as the US. Written in their constitution, US states are modeled after the federal government, and state governments, which mirror the one above, usually have their own chamber of representatives, a senate, and also have an executive mirrored after their president. In Europe, if there was any state that was above the countries that made it up, it would have to be modeled from those very different countries beneath it, rather than serving as a model for the countries below it. This is an important difference because it means that any kind of European government would have to balance parliamentary systems with presidential republics, federal states with unitary ones, and they'll be expected to create a system that hopefully pleases each one sufficiently. All in all, although the differences between the two are practically endless and some are near impossible to actually describe, it's still a worthwhile effort to try and figure a few out and also discuss them.
Dang.
In some way, Europe has more breathing room to understand what it wants to be, which is no easy task, because whatever you think Europe is, it can still look across the Atlantic and realize what it definitely is not.
Look at all those different things. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. Flag obsession. Definitely obsessed with that. Unrest, delivery, diversity of fact.
I was born.
Affordable cheese. Yeah, that video, that's a lot. Because, in my opinion, too, and this is my opinion, I do feel like the U.S. should adopt some of the practices from Europe, especially if we're paying taxes and stuff. Like, we need to see where our money is going, and not only where to see, but like that it almost like an investment. If we're putting something in, we should be able to get something in return. Like, the only thing I shouldn't, like here now, like where I live, the only thing I shouldn't just see my taxes going to fixing the roads. Like right now, they're working on roads that they messed up, and they have to redo them. Like, I should only see my taxes going to you making new roads or redoing roads that you just did a year ago type thing. So, but definitely a big difference. Definitely different. But y'all let me know in the comments what you think. Of course, we know they're not the same. It's totally different. Just even in some of the other videos I've seen, like I feel like it's almost heartbreaking to people in Europe to see like just how it is in America, and just being a citizen and what we have to deal with and expectations and stuff. But that's all I have for this video, guys. Y'all make sure y'all hit that subscribe button, send down those recommendations. Hey, y'all be blessed, be the best, and be you. I'm out.